Hey there folks, this is Josh, Stony Ridge Farmer. Welcome back to the farm. It's another beautiful day here in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and fall is in the air. Today we're going to be working on our Kubota X1140. We've got to change the oil, we've got to change the oil filter, and we've got to change the two hydraulic filters in the rear of the machine. We're going to have a little bit of fun. We'll walk you through this process. If you're considering getting one of these Kubota X1140s, we'll talk a little bit about it, and we're going to have a comparison video and a full review on this versus our John Deere Gator 825i soon. So come along today as we do a full service on our Kubota X1140. All right? Woo! Stony Ridge. Farm, Stony Ridge. Okay guys, so first things first, let me show you, this is the manual, and I had the guys when I bought the machine to flag the manual where we had our different service points on this machine. And basically we're supposed to change our oil filter, check a few things, and do a little lubrication at about 50 hours. We're supposed to lubricate the whole machine around every 50 hours, and then the oil changes will be at 200-hour intervals. So that's pretty simple, pretty easy. What we're doing right now is getting that break-in oil, if it has any break-in oil in it, and we're changing the filters on the hydraulic system because they're more likely to get trashed within the first 50 hours or so, and then they'll start running smooth. So we're going to change all those filters. Now, behind me here, I have the specific types of oil that are required on this machine. This machine has two hydraulic filters, and if you're doing this yourself, you can pause it right there. That's your part number that you'll need, and this is the other hydraulic filter. Pause it. There's your hydraulic filter number, and this is the oil filter. And we got the genuine Kubota type oil filter. If we weren't using genuine Kubota, we'd be using Wix filters. I am a big fan of Napa and a big fan of Wix filters. We also have the Super UDT, which is recommended by Kubota for hydraulic fluid. And we have Shell Rotella T5, which is a synthetic blend. Typically, I'll put a synthetic or a synthetic blend in every piece of equipment that I have. And on the back of this, you have a little label that tells you the certifications of the oil and whether it's appropriate for your machine. And we looked up all those numbers, and the CJ4 or CI4 is what we're looking for. And that's what this is. Good to go. Just a little point I'd like to make. With the new hydraulic systems and the newer engine systems and the tight tolerances on newer vehicles like this, you need to use the recommended oils. Don't mix oils. Don't put some old whatever hydraulic fluid in this machine, because you got to protect your investment. This is an expensive machine, close to 20,000 bucks. So we're protecting our investment, and we're putting everything right as best we possibly can. Now, I'm no mechanic, so if you have any suggestions or any questions or any helpful advice, please post it down in the comment section. All right? Guys, once again, I want to give a huge shout out to Northern Tool for giving me a veteran discount on this clutch toolkit right here. This is an awesome clutch toolkit. We're going to go over it. We're going to do a review on it pretty soon, and we're going to give one away to a very special individual. So be sure you stay tuned to the channel. Pound that like button, subscribe to the channel, jump in there, follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you can. We're going to be giving away an awesome $300 tool set pretty soon. So I'm going to show you how I set up for oil changes, and we have a lot of vehicles here on the farm. This may help you in your struggles of trying to organize yourself for your services on your tractors, trucks, cars, or even if you just live in a neighborhood and you have a lawnmower and a couple cars, this will help you. So what I do to stay organized with my vehicles and with my cars and with all my tractors and lawnmowers and all that stuff is I have a tote with all of my oil change goodies in there. And if ever I need a specialized filter removal wrench, I buy it and I keep it in there, and I keep an adjustable wrench in there. Everything should be in there that I'll need for performing this oil change, aside from pulling the protective pan underneath this machine. So keep an oil change bin and keep a car wash bin in your garage. It's an easy way to organize all this stuff. Also, keep a little book in there that tells you everything you've done and everything you've serviced. So here's our new clutch toolkit, and you can see all the sockets we'll need. Everything is nicely organized in this toolkit. Pretty cool. You want to organize your life, organize your shop. Definitely organize your shop and your garage. Very, very cool toolkit right here. And there's all your wrenches. So we're going to get up underneath here with a 12 millimeter, which I've got in my hand, and we're going to use our little Milwaukee impact. We're gonna remove the pan underneath the Kubota. I will tell you this, I'm not a huge fan of having to remove a guard up underneath my UTV to change the oil. It seems like a hassle that there should be a solution to. I should be able to access the oil drain plug without having to remove this, but such is life. All good. Probably should have some safety glasses on because it's going to rain down on my face. There we go. Easy enough to remove this pan, and here's what the bolts look like. We'll just stack them up right over here. There are 3 bolts towards the front of the machine and 2 bolts towards the rear. Aside from tasting all the goodies that were up in there. So here's our guard. We've removed that. 5 bolts, very easy. Right here is our oil pan, and to the front of the oil pan right here is our drain plug. So we'll remove that drain plug gently, and we will not over tighten when we put it back. There are a few other things that we need to do with this 50-hour service, and I'll explain those to you in just a second. Here's our drain pan. Here's our 14mm bolt. We'll loosen that guy up and drain all the oil out. Hopefully we don't make a big mess, but I tend to make a big mess. It's just kind of my thing. Now there's a little copper washer we want to hang on to here. There we go. Awesome. There's the mess we were looking for. So I got my finger right here because there's another guard pan directly in front of our oil change, our oil drain plug. So evidently we need to remove both guards up underneath here in order to drain the oil. Let all that oil drain out. Now we've got 2 ways we can access our oil filter. We can either go in beside the battery and remove the oil filter, which is a fairly tight space, or we can go in from beneath. I'll show you real quick. There's a cover here. We've removed the battery cover, and you can go in right here, and you can see there's an oil filter down there. That gray thing is the oil filter. Now it's much, much easier to access that from down beneath right here. We can see it right there. So that's how we'll go in. One step I may not have mentioned is we want to warm our engine up to about 110 degrees or so. So I let this machine run for somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 minutes or so. We'll just replace our drain plug. There doesn't appear to be a magnet on the end of this drain plug, which is kind of nice to have sometimes. Okay, make sure we hang on to that little copper washer that's in there. And you definitely don't want to hear grit while we're tightening this down, so I cleaned it off really, really well, and we'll just snug it down. Not Superman tight, but just snug. You don't have to get all fancy with rocket science, but I'm sure there's a spec for how tight that gets. All right, so here's our oil pan. Just to the driver's side of the oil pan is the starter, and the oil filter is directly above us right here. So here I am on the side where the battery is. Again, I honestly think it's going to be easier to go in this way, but it's really tight quarters in here. Seems as though this is going to be the easiest way. There are a couple lines underneath, and I did not want to disturb those lines. One of them I'm sure is a brake line. I don't want to go bending and moving lines out of the way, so this is how we're going to access it. It's a little cumbersome to do an oil change on this. I'm not going to lie. Moderately cumbersome. Okay, so the filter wrench that you're going to need is an 80mm filter wrench. Just so you know, 80mm. Probably should be the same for most of these little Kubota 3-cylinder diesel engines. Good deal. Out comes the oil filter. This is the factory oil filter, and you can tell because it's gray. It's been painted with the engine. All right, we'll take our new filter, we'll put a little bit of oil on the seal right here, and then we'll go up underneath and reinstall. Okay, so I'm going hand tight, but my hands are kind of in a bind down here, so I'm gonna put my filter wrench on here. I'm gonna get it as tight as I can with my hand, then I'm gonna go about a 1/4 turn tighter, just to make sure we don't have any leaks. The hard part's over. All right, we need to torque our wheels down. That's part of the 50-hour service. We're gonna tighten them down to about 95 foot-pounds. Which is a lot. There we go. Good to go. And we'll repeat this process all the way around the whole vehicle. Nice torque wrench. I'll post a link down in the video description to a decent torque wrench that won't break the bank. All right, so we're down here to the rear of the machine for the next part of this project. There are 2 filters in the rear of this machine. They're both transmission filters. We just take one off and lube up the gasket and put it back, and then we take the other one off, lube up the gasket and put it back. Should be pretty simple. I'll show you. All right, there are 2 filters, yellow, and then there's a black one right here. And it takes the same 80 millimeter for the yellow filter. The black one is different. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. That's snug from the factory, man. Very snug. Now before you do this, you want to have your other filter ready to rock and roll, so when you get this off, you can zip the other filter back on. You don't want to go losing a whole bunch of hydraulic fluid out this thing. Again, we're going to rub a little hydraulic fluid right here on our gasket, and we'll slip this guy back on. I'm going to say we had minimal loss, probably lost somewhere less than 1/4 of a quart of fluid. We'll hand tighten this guy. Now we get the black one off. To remove the black one, I have the claw. So we'll get in here with the claw. And it doesn't matter if we dent this thing up a little bit. So we'll get in here and twist it off, I hope. Boy, that's tight from the factory. Quite a booger because they put them on so tight from the factory. This was the same way with my John Deere Gator. It took me like 2 hours to get the oil filter off because it was so tight from the factory. Guess they didn't want him leaking. A little more fluid coming out of him because he's a little bigger filter. The old filter out, a little oil on there. New filter back. Okay, and then we'll just hand tighten both of these guys, and then we'll give them 1/4 turn after I hand tighten them. One thing I failed to mention, you need to make sure your dump bed is all the way dumped back before you drain the oil out, because you have to use the hydraulics in order to raise the bed. That means you got to start the engine. So you can't start your engine without any oil in it. Cool. The last step of the oil change is replacing this pan. Just put those 5 bolts back in. Very simple. We'll get it done. All right. Cool. Let's fill it up. According to the owner's manual, we're at 4.1 quarts. Now, I'm not going to take this gigantic 2.5 gallon container and try to pour an exact amount in there. I've got a transfer container right here that says at full, it's at 4 quarts. I'll post a link to one of these down in the video description. Very, very handy to have. I'll actually post links to all this stuff in case you're servicing the same Kubota. That way you'll have it all. We'll just pour in 4.1 quarts. So it takes 4 quarts when it's full. We'll just go right up to the fill line, and then a skosh more. That's a Canadian term. So let's talk about this. In my oil change bin are funnels. Each funnel gets wiped out before I use it again. In other words, I use a degreaser like Tubba towels to wipe out my funnel before I put a different type of oil through it, so I can be especially obsessive about my oil. I don't want any trash or any goop in my oil. Now I'm going to wipe off the outside edge of the oil filler neck. It had plenty of dust on it, and actually have a rag right here. I'll wipe that guy off. Now the filter should catch all that dust, and then I'll put our funnel right in place, and then we'll pour our oil in. Okay, I will give you a piece of advice for free right here. It's best to not fill up this transfer container all the way full, because it makes it quite a bugger to pour your oil in, and you run a risk of spillage. But this is doing great. So we'll put in our 4 quarts, fire it up, check the oil, make sure we're good to go, and then there is a cover that goes over top of this. I'll take my funnel out. I have a rag handy. I'll lift my funnel to my rag and replace the cap. I always store this container just like that with a rag right on top of it, so we don't get micro dust particles in there. From working in the shop, I always like to have a flashlight to look down in here, so I'm not taking my dipstick and going bang, 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 and banging it around in there and getting dirt all over it. Inevitably, a tractor dipstick hits the dirt sometimes. It just does. So does a UTV dipstick, and we don't want to do that if we can help it. It's not checking that the oil level is at the exact appropriate place. What we're doing is checking to make sure that we're not starting this vehicle with no oil in it. So force of habit, always check your oil, even though you know exactly how much is supposed to go in there as per recommended by the factory. So we are totally within tolerance here. Now this is the X1140, which has 4 seats or 2 seats. So the bed folds up and shortens to make 4 seats. I'll fold this back down and put it back into the 2-seat configuration, which is mainly what we use here on the farm, but we needed a 4-seater for transporting people in case we wanted to show somebody the place or ride people around. We had the little 2-seater John Deere 825i, and it just wasn't big enough. We couldn't haul people around in it. So that's why we got the Kubota, and I like it. We'll start the machine up real quick. Raise the dump bed. All right, so we dumped the bed back for a purpose. There's some lubrication points underneath the bed that we need to address. And I'm gonna check the oil one more time just to make sure. The engine oil filter is done. Transmission filters are done. We checked the brake pedal, parking brake, adjust if needed. We're good to go on that. Brake light switch, it works. Front brake case, all that stuff. It's just inspection stuff basically here, and then there's some lubrication points on the chassis that we need to get into. Parking brake lever, battery terminal needs to be checked, cargo lift cylinder pivot, and that's why we had the bed of the Kubota up, and we have drive links that need to be done, 4-wheel drive link, all kinds of stuff that needs to be done here. If you're not up for this, take it to your Kubota dealer. Front A-arm suspension and rear A-arm suspension. Lots of stuff. We're gonna get underneath here and start greasing. Well guys, according to this book, I got about 15 or 17 more lubrication points. So I'm going to say goodbye for now because you don't really need to know all that, where they all are. You're gonna have to look on your own machine. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what it's like to service this machine if you're considering purchasing a Kubota X1140 or an RTV 900, or I think there's another 1140 model that came out before this. It's all pretty similar. So if you're considering the purchase of a Kubota UTV, now you know how the first service goes. There are some services that you might want to have performed at the dealership if your dealership is close. Is it worth 50 bucks to have the oil changed in this thing? I don't know. Is it worth 50 bucks to spend 20 minutes of your time to get underneath and learn a little bit about how your machine works? I think it's worth 20 bucks. It's well worth the life lesson. So don't spend the money. Just pay attention, do a good job, and take care of your machinery. Guys, thanks a lot for joining me here on the Stony Ridge Farm. I hope you enjoyed this little video. It's a how-to service your Kubota X1140. This is a 2019 model, brand new, 50 hours, and we love it. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time on the Stony Ridge Farm. All right?
Well, come on down to the Stony Ridge. Bring your wife and bring your kids. We're living life pure and sweet. That's the way it's supposed to be, Stony Ridge.
So we wiped the spot clean. We're gonna put the type of oil we used and how many quarts right here with the label maker. Just makes life easier, and as this label wears out, we'll just replace it. But I find it easier than digging for the book trying to figure out how much oil this thing holds. I'll always have it underneath the hood, and I do this with all my vehicles. Just makes good sense. 4.1 quarts. Oil change due 200 hours.